Calming down, she says, maybe, maybe. Yeah, we'll give it a go on that basis. We've gone 30 seconds without a pip, I think, by the sounds of things. So I'll come over and look at this screen. Got two screens on the go this morning, so you can guarantee that I'm going to be splitting my time. Welcome, good morning, everybody, and welcome to a beginner's guide to professional registration. My name is Nicola Johnston. In my day job, I work for IWater as a training development scientist. And in my other hats that I have for the Institute of Water is I am the CPD champion for the Institute of Water, and I'm also the communications lead on the Eastern area. And you're very welcome to this, what has now become an annual event in the Eastern area, but actually it covers the whole of the Institute of Water. So I know looking at all the registrations, we're coming from lots of different parts of the country today, and that is brilliant to see. And so you are very welcome. It's going to be quite a busy session, but you're not going to just be listening to me talk all the time because that would get really irritating and quite boring. You will be seeing lots of different speakers, and I've got a whole panel of experts with me in the room as well. I've got assessors and people who have been through the process of professional registration, and you're going to get to speak to them on a one-to-one basis. The main session, when you're in the main room here, will be recorded, and that's so that we can share it with people who can't unfortunately make the event live. But what we will be doing is we'll be putting you into breakout rooms a little bit later, and you will have an opportunity to speak to those people, face to face. So there is a little bit in the background. I have to do a bit of digital of moving people into different rooms. So if you've registered which interest of which room you want to be in, that's fine. I will have put you across there. If not, I have a room where is an undecided, and Rob Bradley is, as ever, is going to look after that room as well. And don't worry, if you end up in the wrong room, because I have done it at least on previous years, at least once, where I've got people into the wrong room, just come out of the room. I'll be sitting waiting and I will redirect you back to the right room. So if you suddenly get to Rob's room and think, well, I really wanted to be in engineering, I don't know why, but they might do. Or maybe they want to go over and see somebody else in environment or science, then just pop back to the main room and I'll not be far away and I can do the magic of putting you in a room. When I do open the rooms initially, you might find there's a slight delay because you might have not been allocated a room as yet, but I will get on with that and do that straight away. So just bear with us. You know what technology's like. I know some people have said to me as well that they've got commitments, they might arrive late or might have to leave early. Don't worry about it. That's real life. That's fine. We're very busy working people. The recording will get sent out to you automatically because you're registered for the event. So, what are we going to do? First of all, I do have to thank our Eastern area sponsors. Without them, actually, events like this don't happen. And do check out the programme of events, both for the Institute of Water and in the Eastern area. There is an awful lot this year, and there's an awful lot of variety, everything from technical to well-being and right the way across. And certainly, there's a lot of events, and my colleague Claire Withers, who's on the call, and I have put together, I would say, quite an amazing programme for this year in the East. But, I am biased. What can I say? Now, in terms of, just to give you an idea of what today it's going to look like, we're going to start out with a bit of an icebreaker because you might be a little bit nervous and a little apprehensive about what's going to happen. Don't worry, it's not going to be horrible, I promise. Just a chance to get to know the people that you're going to be chatting to this morning. So we're going to do that in a second. Then I'm going to come back and I'm going to talk a little bit about what professional registration is, because sometimes people are a little bit mystified as to what actually it means. And then we're going to have a breakout session to explore that a little bit more and explore what we call the competencies. Don't worry, if you've not come across the term, it will make sense once I've gone through it, I promise. We'll then bring in a comfort break because I don't know about you, but after a while, when I'm hunched over the computer, I start to get a bit stiff and I think you need a bit of a refresh of caffeine or whatever your pleasure is, and also a little bit of a break as well away from the computer. And it'll also give you time to catch up on some of those calls as well. Once we come back, I'm going to talk a little bit about CPD, which is a bit of a passion of mine. And we're going to talk a little bit more about what that actually involves. So you might not come across that. And then we'll have a breakout session exploring that with all of the mentors, I should say, that are here around CPD. Then Rob is going to talk about the application process, and he looks after absolutely all of the applications coming through. So what he doesn't know about the application process, I can probably write on a very, very small postage stamp, I have to say. And he is really good at really reassuring you that you can get through this process. And he's there really to hold your hand, as it were, through that process. And then we're going to wrap up with feedback from my colleague Claire Withers, who just completed her Chartered Environmentalist just before Christmas. And she's going to talk you through how her experience of the process as well. And she was one of our winners of the CPD award last year as well. So I have asked her just to talk a little bit on CPD as well. So Claire will wrap up the session as well for us. And then finally, we'll have a few, 15 or so minutes just to wrap up any questions that you want to ask and answer. Oh dear, no, I can't get my words out this morning. You'll also notice I have enabled Q&A as well on this, so feel free to pop into the Q&A any questions you have for any of our speakers, and we'll try and answer those. Equally, there is also chat is enabled as well. So if you've got any technical problems or you're stuck or anything like that, please just pop them in there and I'll be sitting in the background watching all of that while it goes on. So a lot to get through, really. But we aim to wrap up by 12 o'clock. Obviously, if you have to drop off early for whatever reason, don't worry. You'll be able to catch the rest of the recording as well. I think I've covered everything that's housekeeping. It was quite a long list, to say the least. So without further ado, I think we'll move on to our icebreaker. So you might need your mobile phone if you're on your whatever other devices you have to hand. And then while you're doing that, if you could just scan this little QR code for me. I will post it into the rooms when you move across as well. And what it'll do is it'll open a little icebreaker. And really, when you get to the room, all I want you to do is have an opportunity to do some introductions, get to know the people that you're working with, do a bit of networking. And by the end of that session, I'd like you to be able to tell me really what you'd like to learn today. Now, it could be a very simple word. It might be just one or two words. I'm not looking for rocket science here, really. It's just what your feelings are. You may not know what you want to learn today. That's absolutely fine as well. But I've got an amazing group of people that will help you through that process, I'm sure. So without further ado, I'm going to open the breakout rooms. I know there's at least one person I need to assign, so I'll do that straight away, but I'll get everybody popped into the rooms. And then anybody who has any problems, please just let me know. And all of our facilitators will be able to send me a message as well through the chat function. I will see it as well. So I'm going to open the room now. I'll see you in a bit. Oh dear. Welcome back, everybody. I'm hoping nearly everybody's back. I've closed all the rooms. We did have a few technical issues there. I do know that we had a few technical issues. In reality, we had Jo, we don't know what happened to Jo's IT. She had hers completely crashed, but that is just the very nature of it. And I'm not sure what was going on with Slido this morning, but hey ho, thank you for those that persevered. But interestingly, and I had a chat with Jo's group while we were getting Jo sorted out. I think really there was a lot of conversation about CPD. So that's good because we're going to talk about that a little bit later. And Rob and I have got some webinars planned throughout this year around the whole CPD side of things as well. Bit career advice as well, so I think that's good. Utilize your the people in your rooms. Knowledge process. Yeah, there was a big conversation in the room I was in around the process and the requirements, competencies. Thanks, Anna. And certainly Rob and I are going to cover off both of those with you as well. So that's really good. Interesting about member engagement. We also had the conversation about a couple of people just finding out about the IWater. So you are very welcome. I did say sometimes people have said we're the best kept secret. And then somebody says that makes us a nice niche club. So I kind of like that as well. But you're very welcome. So good to see. Great that you've had a chance to have those conversations. You will have plenty of time to have more conversations, I have to say, as well. So I'm just going to get my slides back up and we're on track, she says. There we go. And with a bit of luck, we should be back to where we want to be. So Professional registration, what actually is it? I have to say, when I first started many years ago looking at professional registration, I wasn't really sure what it was. I was familiar with the concept that, if you went to maybe get your house built or you may be an accountant, you would be looking, potentially for those professional qualifications. And you would hear things like chartered accountant, chartered surveyor. But what did it mean? Well, really, ultimately, is what it does is it recognizes your own individual competence and experience. For some of us, it might be a long time since you were at university, school, college. Maybe you didn't pursue formal qualifications, and maybe you want something that recognizes that the competency level that you've developed in your role. And there are many of these around in the industry. You can do anything from environmentalist, scientist, engineer, but what also doesn't show up on this slide probably quite so well is that's, if you like, at the top of the pinnacle, if you like, but there are stages in between. So if you're just starting, and I was chatting away to one of the people in the group I popped into, and they've just left, they've just started in a role. And as I said, there is something for you as well at this stage as well. So it's worth bearing in mind that this covers all ends of your career. Now, what we have seen certainly is that professional registration is something that many of our stakeholders and regulators are looking to see as an industry that we have. And kind of when I think about it, I work in a water quality environment. Why would, our regulator not want to see that the people operating and dealing with that aspects of water quality are professionals, they have qualifications, and professional registration that matches that. And that is certainly something I found through doing professional registration. It has definitely unlocked things in my world. And I think, one, building my network, and it was great that when I popped into a room, they were exchanging email addresses because they had some connections, which was brilliant. That's part of it, that networking element of it. But equally, I got to a stage in my career where I'd been about 19 years into my career. I'd done 2 degrees when I'd left university in microbiology. But I felt at that point in time when I did my registration that it didn't recognise who I was at that point, the water professional that I'd become. And in reality, I sort of thought, yeah, I don't really want to do another degree or something like that. I wanted something recognised who I was. And it certainly has done that and unlocked things and a network beyond my registration. It also shows your professional commitment. It's also about keeping your skills up to date. One of the things that you are required through any of the professional registrations, whether it's engineering, environment, or science, is to maintain your CPD, your continuing professional development. And this time of year is generally the time of year when Rob and I are very, very busy getting people to send in their CPDs, because one of the activities that we have to do is make sure that people are continuing to do it. And we do, it is an audit, but it really is an opportunity for us to see how people are getting on with their CPD and offer support and coaching. And I can tell you, nobody at any level escapes this. I got mine picked this year, so mine's already on Rob's desk. So I can honestly say, hopefully he's not going to make me assess my own, because that would be terrible, but I doubt it. But we had people from directors right the way down last year that ended up in the mix. And you know what? Most people talk about it as being a positive experience, and that's what we want. CPD really helps you develop, helps you progress, and it also helps you affirm what goals you've got individually. And ultimately, it's recognised by external bodies, employers, and as I say, is an increasing expectation in the industry. Now, we are very lucky in the Institute of Water that we can offer all three: engineering, science, and environment. And we also offer them at 3 different disciplines. So you have 9 choices effectively, which actually is brilliant, and many more compared to others, I have to say. You'll see that they all start down at the technician level and they work their way through up to the equivalent of chartered level. Now, where you sit in those 3, or those 9, I should say, will depend on your skills, your experience, qualifications comes into it, but it isn't mandatory that you have to have qualifications. So some of these are based on vocational experience. So don't think, oh God, I haven't got that PhD, whatever. I've got many colleagues who are very good at what they do, and they don't have the conventional degree structure maybe you might expect. You'll also see as well, increasingly, some of the levels down at the technician level, they align with apprenticeships as well. And there's lots of streamlined paths, especially in science, coming through around that as well. So there are lots of choices there. And if you're not sure what choices you want to, where you think you should be, when you go back into your groups, have that conversation with your facilitators. They know where the grades are. And I often have conversations with people where they think actually they're going in at maybe a lower grade and they should be going at a higher grade, and vice versa sometimes. So use your facilitators when you go back into the room to have those conversations about what level you might be interested in. And you know what? If you're aiming for chartered, but you're not quite there at the moment, then go for something a little the next one down. That then means you can plan your CPD to how you progress to the next stage and how you move on through that process. So look out for those. Have a think about what you might be interested in, because then when you go back into the breakout rooms, you can have that conversation. Now, this little table, and I know Rob was constantly just tweaking and updating it, kind of gives you an idea of where the actual grades sit. What you'll see if you're familiar with sort of vocational qualifications, like doing your typical A levels, degrees, that kind of thing. Your technician level is usually benchmarked at a level 3. Your interim one, that is at a level 5, and then a level 7 is the equivalent for your chartership. So you're normally talking masters and above from there. But for example, in the science one, you can demonstrate that master's equivalence knowledge in there as well. Now, you'll see there it says corporate member and technician. We are in the process, just as of January, some new gradings coming in, so that will slightly tweak, and I'm sure Rob will update this table for next year once we come through to that, and we'll see that. But you'll also see the CPD requirements. So there's a minimum of a year if you're going in at the technician grade. If you're going in at the higher grade, you need 2 years. And sometimes people find that a little bit daunting, but we can guide you through that process. There are many ways that you can actually do that. You will also, when you do the application, you'll need your CV, you'll need a copy of your job description. You'll also need a sponsor, and sometimes people struggle with the sponsor side of things. In bigger companies, that might be easy. You might think, oh, my line manager, they're chartered, they're registered, whatever, they can do that for me. But if you're in a small company, maybe there's only 2 or 3 of you, you might be thinking, well, I haven't got anybody. Then do think about reaching out to the mentoring platform that the Institute of Water run. There are many of us on there who are mentors, and we offer that. You know, we can coach, we can mentor as well. And I've certainly done that for many companies where there's only 1 or 2 people, where I've certainly had people reach out and say, I can't find anybody. Can you point us in the right direction? And I also know Rob is very good as well, that if people are really stuck and they can't even find anything on the mentoring platform, he normally knows somebody who knows somebody. And we normally can manage to find somebody to help you with that process. You'll also need signed copies of your academic certificates as well. So you do need to make sure you've got those as well. And again, your sponsor will have to say that they've seen those and evidence of seeing those. How you're assessed, and sometimes people, when they see the assessment bit, they do get a little bit worried. If you're a technician, it's a paper-based assessment, so you send it in. 2 assessors independently review it. They have to be independent of you, so i.e. I can't assess my friends and colleagues because that would not be very ethical. So we do need to make sure they're independent. We also then, if you are moving up to the second 2 levels, including chartership, that is done by a remote assessment. So normally by teams these days with 2 assessors. So you do your paper-based application, and then you're called to your what we call a review. We don't call it an interview because it's not the big spotlight, and it's not 20 questions where you've got to get the right answers. It's about us finding out about you and your work. You are validating that it is your work. I know I do many of these reviews, as do many of my colleagues who are facilitating today. And if you talk to them about why they do this, it's because they really enjoy the conversation. And I love finding out about people, and I love finding out about what people do, especially across all the different disciplines that we have across this industry. So for us, it's a brilliant hour of our time where we get to find out lots about stuff about people. Maybe it's inherently that little bit of nosiness as well, possibly. I don't know. But the great thing is about it, you get to enjoy the experience. So I always, when you talk to people, they often say, well, I wasn't expecting to enjoy it, but I've really enjoyed the process. I'm hoping Claire will say something later, but similar along those lines. I'm not priming her at all because she'll tell you very honestly how hers went. So that's kind of a bit of a flavour of what you need to do. Now, a couple of people asked me when we were in the breakout room before about competencies. Competencies are basically the questions you have to answer, the evidence you have to provide to get through the process. Now, across all three disciplines, they look very similar. You'll see the words are slightly different because there's an engineering or an environment or a science focus, but broadly they come into these 5 categories. Knowledge and understanding. So I always say to anybody I'm mentoring in the science side, this is the science bit. So you tell me about your science experience. And it's basically showing through your job, how you do stuff or your experiences. Then you've got the design, the development processes, systems and products. And you'll see there's a bit of health and safety features in there as well. Responsibility management and leadership. And depending on the level you're going in at, when you get up to the chartered level, it talks more about management and leadership. You don't need to be a line manager to be managing stuff. It could be managing a project, for example, or leading a project. You then have a section on communication and interpersonal skills. So this is how you work with people. So if you think about the different communication routes that you've got available to you, so things like oral, verbal, written, etc. And it's giving examples of how you deal with that in your work life. You've also got your professional commitment. So that's your commitment to the code of practice for the organisation that you are doing your membership through. So in this case, the Institute of Water, but also through the Science Council Environment and Engineering Council. And also there's a statement around CPD and your approach to CPD. All of them really require that you put a paragraph in. They'll have a word count in there, and Rob will talk a little bit more about that later on in the session. But what I always say to people is come up with some ideas, a bit of brainstorm, a couple of lines of the things that you're actually going to use for them. Generally, you can go back a number of years, but you're talking sort of, up to between about 2 and 5 years, depending on the grade you're going for. Equally, if you do stuff outside work, that maybe brings some of those skills through. So things like maybe a parent governor, maybe you're a volunteer for an organisation, maybe you volunteer for WaterAid. Those experiences and skills that you gain, you can utilise in some of these competencies as well. So don't forget the stuff that you do beyond maybe the day job. Quite a lot of people do stuff and they don't always think about that enhancing their skills. Anybody who's like a parent teacher, sort of on a governor, they might be balancing a budget. So financial measuring, doing stuff financially can come into that. So don't forget to use those skills because, you've gained them, you've earned them, you might as well use them at the end of the day. So, not a comfort break. That's me going too far in my slides. Yeah, I worked you up to a comfort break there, didn't I? No, you're not. So what I'm going to do for the next half hour is pop you back into your breakout sessions. Your facilitators have got access to the competencies because I made sure they all had them beforehand, but to be fair, many of them know them very, very well. And really, you're going to have an opportunity to chat through those competencies for your particular discipline, talk about the different grades. You might have questions about what grade you should be going for. This is your opportunity to put them on the spot and ask them some questions. Think about, maybe you're struggling for some examples for some of these competencies, and they will help you with those conversations. So I'm going to pop you back into your group. Hopefully by the magic of television, it'll work, as they say. And let's see if Joe magically goes this time. That's what I'm hoping for. So I'm going to open the rooms. I'll give you a warning when we're coming back. We will be going straight to coffee after the break. So I will let you know. So I am going to restart and hopefully everybody else is back. on talking about CPD. So I hope you had some fabulous conversations about competencies. I'm assuming, I'm assured, she says, that our facilitators would always do an amazing job. So I'm sure they've answered any questions, but if there's still any burning ones, you can post them on the Q&A was what I was trying to say, she says. Some days I can't remember what I'm trying to say. So our next section we're going to focus in is one of the key bits, which I find when I talk to people who do applications, is CPD. And a lot of people really struggle with this because, and I think one of the biggest things I've always learned about is they start it as the last thing. And actually, if you start it as your first thing, it helps with your application. But often people do it back to front. And I think that's when it gets them into trouble. So what is CPD? Well, CPD is what is known as continual professional development. Now, you often see slight different versions in the words if you Google on the internet, but it's basically about maintaining your competence and showing that you are competent in the areas you're trying to demonstrate in your professional registration. Now, lots of different industries do it. You'll see medics have to do it as part of their ongoing competencies. You see it in lots of different institutions and professional registration. So we're no different at the end of the day. Now, each of the 3 disciplines that we offer all require us to do CPD, and that is something you do as part of your application, and then is something that you maintain. And that CPD will change. So what you might decide your CPD looks like today might be different in 10 years' time. And I can tell you over the time I've been doing it, it definitely has evolved and changed as I've grown and developed. Now, generally, it goes into this 5 sort of ball model with the one in the center, which I'll come to in a second. But it normally starts with that scoping piece. And the scoping piece is really thinking about what do you want to do? What do you want to do to develop individually? So you may have corporate goals. You know, you might have something set by your line manager. I certainly do. But equally, I will have personal goals, and those goals will change depending on what I'm doing. So this month I'm slightly crackers. I think I've come to the conclusion. I've decided to walk 62 miles for cancer research. 2 miles a day it works out as. But what I forgot to account for is how flipping cold it is first thing in the morning, that's for sure. But do you know what? I wanted to challenge myself. I wanted to see if I could do it. And what am I learning about it? Well, do you know what? So far, what I know is that actually it's a really good time to think in the morning while I go for that long walk. But that scoping is part about what do I want to do? Now, it might be, and I often say this to people doing professional registration, possibly one of the things you want to do is complete your professional registration. So that's your need, if you like. You're then going to plan it. How are you going to do it? What are those goals? So I guess my goal is currently to get to the 62 miles before the end of the month and create myself a little bit of breathing space just in case I have the day where I can't get out of bed or I may be a bit under the weather, shall we say. But you set yourself some goals. Those goals, you know, we talk about SMART goals, if you've come across that term before. So you've got they're measured, they're specific, they're time bound. So it might be, I want to complete my professional registration and obtain whatever grade you're going for by the end of 2025. I nearly said 2024. I'm nearly at that stage of still trying to get the new date in there. So whatever it is that are your goals, don't have too many goals. I often find people go absolutely crazy with goals and then they can't sustain them. So think about really distilling them down into the key things you want to do. Obtain professional registration. Maybe you're looking for a new role. Maybe you want a career direction change. Who knows? Then you go off and do the doing element of it. So those activities that you do that contribute to it. So at the moment I've got, what day are we on? Day 9. I've got 9 walks that contribute to my goal of the 62. Equally, if you're doing your professional registration, for example, you're going to have different sections that you do. So for example, attending this session counts as CPD, but also maybe having a conversation with your mentor will count as CPD. All that time you're writing will count as CPD. The activities that you can include as CPD are very, very varied, pretty much unlimited, really. Don't get niched into meetings and conferences, I would say. There are lots of different other things you can do. You then record it. And there are lots of different ways around to record this. And one of them, we have an online platform on the Institute of Water site, which is linked up to your membership. Or we also have an Excel spreadsheet. And I do find the Excel spreadsheet I often recommend to people is a great way to start because it literally asks you all the questions that are covered in these bubbles on the slide as well. I will share, once you get back into rooms, I will share the Excel template into the room as well. So all the facilitators have got it and you've got access to it as well. Once you've done that recording, you do the reflection part, probably the hardest part and often the part people struggle with the most. What did you learn? What did you find out? That could be positive. It was a great course. I really enjoyed it. I had a really good session with my mentor and I've realized I need to do this. Or it could be something negative. It could be, do you know what? Actually, that really didn't work for me. I didn't get what I expected out of it. But you know what? I'll do something different. So it becomes a cyclical loop that, when you reflect, and I usually do an end of year reflection, which I did just before Christmas. What have I learned over the year? What do I need to change? What do I need to modify? The cycle should continue to go round. At the heart of it, one of the things that we do is have the sharing the benefit with others. Now, that might seem a bit of a strange thing. This is a personal development plan. But what you find is that sharing with others is how we grow as well. So if you think about it, some activities you'll do will have the ability to share information with others. Maybe you went on a course and you decided to share it with your whole team. Brilliant. Or it might be, it is very personal and you look at it and think, well, actually, no, there isn't anything I can share it with. But, if I think about some of the things I do, so running a webinar like this, I've done scoping, planning, the doing, the recording, the reflecting. What will I reflect on after this one is finished and share with others? Well, I am sharing this with you. I am sharing with you how to take a professional registration journey. And will I learn? And when I think, well, what will I do differently if I run this session next year? How will I make it smarter, quicker, more efficient, whatever it happens to be? So there are lots of different opportunities where you can share, you can have conversation, think about that cyclical nature. I would expect when I look at CPD on an annual basis as part of the audit and also later on in the year, we have a CPD award. So get your applications in when it opens. But equally, when I look at those CPDs across the board, I never see two identical ones because it's so personal. It's so about you. And, sometimes people find it a really cathartic experience. Some people really struggle with it. But if you do, reach out to us. I'm always happy to talk to people about CPD, as is Rob. And also, we've got some other webinars coming up as well on the very topic as well. Ultimately, CPD comes down to really that planning, development, think about your skills and your goals. And you also have to sometimes stick, a bit as the quote there, take a step back and then think about yourself. Often when people talk to me, they talk about their corporate goals. And that's great because they are your corporate goals. But what are your personal goals? And they may be slightly different. They're definitely going to align, but they're going to be slightly different. So slightly ahead of schedule, she says, but that's good because that gives us a bit of time. I'm going to pop you back into groups and Rob's group, I'll come and pop in and see you and sort out where you're going as well, because I think you're a smaller group. But what I will do is I will pop you into groups with your facilitators and that'll give you an opportunity to have a conversation about CPD. So maybe you're not sure whether the goals that you're setting yourself are, okay. Maybe you've got to a point where you've got stuck. You're thinking about what tools. I'm going to leave you in the very capable hands of the facilitators, and I know that they're all very good at CPD. So there's definitely a few experts in the rooms, as it were. So ask them whatever you want to ask. Right, I'm going to open the rooms. Bear with me while I just pop over here and get that sorted out. There we go. We're off to our rooms. Welcome back, everybody. I think the rooms are all just closing as ever. You're probably getting a bit dizzy now by all this backwards and forwards in rooms. I know I do get a little bit dizzy after a while with it all. Um, you'd be pleased to know you're staying in one place now for the foreseeable future till the end of the session. So no more bouncing around, at least I hope, she says. Um, I hope you had some great conversations about CPD. And I know there was a couple of technical problems where some people could open an Excel sheet and some people couldn't. Can I just say the IT and Gremlins are definitely working today, but I will make sure you get that sent out to you as part of you getting the recording sent out to you. That's my job for post lunch today. So I'm going to stop talking for a while because you've heard enough from me, and I'm going to hand over to Rob Bradley, who looks after all of our professional registrations, and he's going to talk you through the application process.
Good morning for those of you who haven't heard from me so far today. My name's Rob, as you can tell. I've been working professionally for the Institute since 2022. I was a volunteer for a decade beforehand, and as part of the role I have at the moment, a large portion of what I do for a living these days has been drawn directly from the volunteer work I did in assessment, mentoring, and basically supporting candidates through their own professional registration journeys. As a wee bit of other background, I was a chef for 15 years before I joined the before I went to university rather. My degree is in environmental history, which is really the history of how we as humans have used the planet. I worked in conservation, so nature reserves for 4 years, and I was a technical consultant for Scottish and Northern Ireland Water for 12 years. In amongst that, one of the difficulties I had when it came to my own application was to try to consolidate all that experience into meaningful ways. And that's the challenge that each of you will be facing in terms of, regardless of which of the 9 grades that you apply for, how to articulate in a really short, punchy way which aspects of your career you're going to use to apply. Nicola, could you move on to the slide, please? So the first thing, I'm going to go through this in a bit of detail. The guidance aspect of things is a really important first place to start with. I've seen a number of applications over the last 2 years, which is basically referencing out-of-date guidance that's been either on your corporate systems or basically not on our website. So please check our website to begin with to see what the most up-to-date guidance is. The standards do change, and for those of you who are thinking about science registration in the next 2 years, the science standards are changing this year. So be aware of that. The second aspect of the guidance is that it's going to give you the key criteria you need in order to complete the applications. Each of those 9 grades have different criteria, and that's for particularly specific reasons relating to that particular grade and the discipline that you're applying for. In every case, you're going to need a sponsor, and that sponsor is absolutely critical in terms of helping check off the detail of your application, but also the quality of it as well. They will need to have an understanding of your own work experience and the grade that you're applying for. And if you have any issues trying to find relevant sponsors with those criteria, get in touch with us and we'll help find people for you. It's not a problem. We do it frequently. The CV aspect of things is interesting. I, in my day job, read and view quite literally hundreds of CVs in the course of my year. And one of the 2 really important aspects of this is that have a statement at the top which tends to define a little bit about who you are and what you're doing. The CV for registration doesn't need to be a list of projects. In many respects, it's best if it's not a list of projects, because for those people who are viewing it, they may be unfamiliar with your area of work, and a list of projects really that sells yourself or sells your company isn't particularly relevant for what we're looking for. We're looking for outcomes. The work that you've done, how you brought your experience together, and then provided specific examples which demonstrate each nuance of the sub-competencies within the registration. The point in that second sentence there about formal qualifications versus professional experience is really, really important to remember. What an education qualification provides you with is a baseline of knowledge. How you apply and use that knowledge is the essence and the foundation steps of a registration application. So for those of you who've come from either the tools or the water sector is a second, or in my case, I think it was a third career actually. That's not a barrier, and in many respects, that will enhance the quality of your application because it demonstrates the breadth of experience that you bring to the job that you're doing, but also the touch points in terms of motivating factors. It could be that you have joined the industry accidentally. It was the only job out of hundreds that you applied for that accepted it. Now you're in, you see the opportunities presented to you, and registration is a way of drawing all the experience that you've gained into a single statement that demonstrates the quality to which you work at. The certificates there is a step that basically helps us validate and verify the education standards that you hold. And the CPD record, which we've talked about in a lot of depth, is absolutely essential for two very good reasons. One of them is that it demonstrates how you've gained that experience in terms of driving yourself forward, or in some cases backward. That's not a bad thing, over the course of whichever length of time is required for your application. It also demonstrates the standard to which you hold yourself. So the expectations you've put in place for your own development over 12 to 5 years, depending on the grade you're applying for, gives us at the Institute, but also your assessors, a much fuller picture of where you see yourself. And that's particularly important because what we look for, what we assess at registration standards, is how you've consolidated all your experience to apply now, but critically what you're going to do in the future to maintain it. And CPD is the mechanism to maintain the standard that you've chosen to apply for. The job role can often come from your company and the application process you made to join the company. And the registration fees are, as they say there. Next slide. So one of the most difficult aspects of the registration process is writing about yourself in glowing terms. For many of us, especially those that work in teams and lead teams, identifying and singling out aspects of what you actually did to drive that team or to create the work or to check it can be quite difficult. The other aspect, which is immensely difficult for people to get the hang of things, is that each of those competency statements is written in a really generic fashion. And that's because out of the 40 odd people on this call, each of you brings a wealth of experience to the role that you have, and that writing specific core competencies that reflect only what you've done is incredibly hard to do. It's easier to keep it generic from a management perspective. That said, this is where your mentor comes in really handy, because they will help break down the individual definitions within those core competencies and help you translate them in the terms and the reference points of your own your own experience rather. The one paragraph aspect of things, we tend to recommend people use a star format. So a star being, situation, task, activity, and report or result. And by creating a basic statement that reflects each of those points in a single competency paragraph is an excellent starting place that you can then expand on if you, depending on whether you've got more examples to bear or you've got a better outcome to point out to. The last thing on that is really important because for those of you who are applying for probably any grade, actually, I used to talk about chartership, but this is applicable for any grade these days, is that we're all members of the water sector. That means we do lots of different jobs and we have lots of different backgrounds. One of the key outcomes, which is not really defined, let's say, in all our guidance, is that to be able to explain to people who have some experience or some knowledge, but not details of what you do, in a way that is clear, means that you stand a much better chance of being able to get the message across quickly in one go. It also means that you'll inspire and influence people, and specifically your work colleagues, but also it could be your family, it could be people you meet down in the pub or the sports club that you work in. And that will stand you in incredibly good stead for any job anywhere in the water sector. Simplicity is the key. Don't use acronyms. Don't use technical language. Keep it simple. Next slide. So, yeah, abbreviations, as I mentioned, I prefer not to use them, mainly because I see and speak with people from lots of different companies across the UK. Each of those companies has their own acronym for more or less the same thing. And if you can actually reduce it and just tell them exactly what it means, helps a huge amount. The examples of outside work is really useful for folk who are applying at technical grade in particular, or the intermediate level 5 grades, where they may not have direct line management experience and they need to be trying to demonstrate leadership. The two words I mentioned earlier about inspiring and influencing, you can do that outside of a work context, but then bring it to your day job through just simply the way that you either communicate and inspire people. That could come from coaching football team in this case. My case, I also am a rowing coach, and I help people learn to row for the first time, regardless of whether they're in their 30s or in their 60s. The point there about using I, this is, as I mentioned at the beginning of this, you taking pride in what you've done, demonstrating that it's only you are the catalyst that has affected a team. And the role that you do and how you achieve that is really what we're trying to see. The second last aspect there, in terms of the independent, having someone outside of your workplace. In our mentoring scheme and mentoring platform, one of the things I recommend, not just to Institute of Water members, but I advocate this in many other environments that I work in, is that getting a mentor that doesn't work in your company is a really important and powerful way to help produce an application for assessment, because they're going to be a lot more subjective in terms of bringing their experience from a different company into it. Last thing in terms of word count goes back to being clear. In some applications, there is a word count that is explicit, and that's driven by our license requirements. In others, it's a bit more open. But the point here is that we want you to be able to summarize what you're trying to say in a simple fashion so that it's clear. That's partly why the word count is put in place. It's not an absolute, it's more for clarity. And the last point on that word count is that because everything that we provide or we engage with you as applicants now is digital, every time you send large attachments, it has a carbon impact. It also has a data management impact as well. So we have a hard data limit of 20 meg for your entire application. There are ways that you can compress appendices to reduce that data management, data quotient. But the point I'm trying to make and reinforce over and over again is keep it simple. Only use an appendix if it actually demonstrates something that you haven't managed to explain in the competency description itself. And that is more or less the end of it, apart from this next slide, which I've forgotten about. So once the application process is ready, yes, send it to me. However, there's a little nuance there. So I'm going to start at the bottom there. So registered and chartered level applications is a two-stage process. They'll look at the pack, they'll provide feedback before the interview. So that the interview itself is based on thank you, Joanne, no problem. The interview itself is based on feedback provided to the candidate. For technician level, the feedback is the end of the application process. So for those of you who are applying for level 5, 6, and 7, so registered and chartered level, starting your full report before you send in the initial stage is an absolutely important part of this. The application processes I have tried to streamline both from a register and application perspective, but also from an assessment perspective over the course of the last couple of years, and it is evolving, which is why I refer back to what I said at the beginning. Check the guidance on our website. It's the most up-to-date that's there. And any questions, drop me a line. Nicola. Okay, last slide. Again, second last slide, right? This is the second last slide. I thought this was the last slide. Okay. Someone asked in our previous session what their expectations were for an interview. The first thing is it's fun. Invariably, this is a singular point in your career where you get to talk about yourself to people who are genuinely interested in what you do in a way with the amount of detail that and depth of information that really describes your expertise that you will have no other experience of. It's a fantastic opportunity, and we as assessors learn so much about the rest of the sector through it. The mentoring aspect of things in terms of preparation is important so that you can do some relaxation exercises beforehand. For example, you'll notice that I actually stand for all meetings. I use my hands a lot. Position the camera so you can see my hands, and expressions as well. Demonstrate who you are and take control a little bit of that little space that we have around us. The outcome of that interview is not going to be told to you at that point in time. It goes through a checking process that's internal to us, and it's for qualification, for quality management purposes. And then the outcome is then uploaded or checked with the licensing bodies. The Science Council are the only people who require us to then issue the certificates, but the Engineering Council and the Science Council only accept applicants quarterly, so there can be an additional delay to things. The last thing I'll say is for engineering candidates, not simply within the Institute, but across the entire UK, we are seeing a huge uptake in people who want to become an engineering registrant. This is great. However, for reasons which I'm not going to go into just now, the number of assessors we have to conduct those applications are comparatively few. So the application process at the moment for engineering is around 6 months. Please do not worry. This is because we want to take our time and get it right. And we can only do that by allowing the assessors that we have a little bit of a break and also training as well. Nicola.
Helps if I can find the unmute button. Thanks, Rob. So I'm very conscious that we're well on time, but we've still got plenty of time. If there's any questions you want to ask of any of our panelists that we've spoken to, please pop it in the Q&A board. But I'm going to very swiftly hand over to Claire Withers. And I have known Claire a very long time. And I think she'll probably tell you as well, I've been nagging her for quite a while to do her professional registration. And she completed it last year. So it's over to you, Claire, wherever you are on my screen. I'll spotlight you.
Yeah, I've had the privilege of working with Nicola for about 13 years, and a vast number of those were when we were in the old office environment, where she would nag me almost on a weekly basis to complete my application. And ironically, I managed to dodge it all the way until post-COVID, and then actually stopped procrastinating and cracked on last year. So yeah, last year I achieved my environmental chartership through IWater, and as I said just before, I procrastinated. If I'm genuinely honest, I procrastinated for a vast number of years, flip-flopping between thinking about doing a registered scientist application and then finding my feet with the environmental one. I suppose my main reason for flip-flopping was my previous role was managing the water regulations team, which within the Anglian water environment sits within water quality. And I was surrounded by many colleagues who were busy completing scientific applications left, right and centre. As I said, sat behind Dr. Nicola Johnson, nothing like a imposter syndrome when you have a dance and drama degree and feel like you don't own any part of that space, really. So I wanted to complete my professional registration. All the nods were that it should be within the scientific space, but I think my main concern was that I was going to struggle knowing where I wanted to go in the future. I was going to struggle to evidence that competency in the future. And ironically, now the role that I perform is an optimization program manager, and some of the programs that I have run in the past, I really would have struggled to continue that competency evidence. So the environmental thing fits much better with the career path that I've chosen to take. But one thing I will push massively is, yes, I never did any more than fill my name and address in on that scientific application over a number of years. I did fill in my CPD rigorously. I focused on what I wanted. I focused on what gaps I had. I did that whole scoping piece and a SWOT analysis. You know, what strengths do I have in the industry I work in? Where are my weaknesses? What do I need to know more about? And then the threats and opportunities piece of SWOT is taking it that step further. So what opportunities lie with the strengths that I have? I might not know the technical side of this part of the industry, but what can I bring that the department doesn't have? And equally, the threats are things like, we're just about 3 months off a new AMP. You know, where is the company going to go? Where is the industry going to take us? What regulations are going to change that might impact my working life? And I would wholly recommend anyone starting off to do that SWOT analysis piece, and it will grow. You know, it might start off incredibly small, but over time, the more you know about yourself, the more you're going to get out of this whole process. So then, as I said, I moved roles, and I've moved around Anglian Water an awful lot. I was the first female NT within Anglian Water, which is the only decent photo I would ever say of myself, which is why I put it on every possible webinar, because I'm really proud of that photo, even though I'm not blonde anymore, because other than my wedding photo, they're the only two that I would ever show anybody, really. So, and it allowed me to focus on my environmental chartership application. So I checked I met all the relevant criteria, and more importantly, sadly, I am of an age now where I had to spend probably 2 nights finding all the relevant certificates that I'd need to evidence that. and I have been directed to a variety of routes where you can get copies. If you have literally put it in such a safe place, you will never find it ever again. And then I started the application, and that's fundamentally where the hardest work began. And for that, I really understand the benefit of mentorship. I know Rob mentioned it earlier, and I knew I needed a mentor or two for this particular venture that I was about to undertake. And the people choose mentors for a variety of reasons. But for me, I looked for two. I looked for someone I trusted and respected and knew me well enough to be really, really honest. And that was my good friend, Nicola. And then on top of that, I wanted someone that didn't know me as well and would ask me probably some really challenging questions and make me think much more in depth about what I've done. And for that, I didn't actually choose a chartered environmentalist. I chose a chartered scientist, and that's the lovely Matt Bauer. And I think he's also on this call. And that particular relationship for me, I feel, was beneficial from both sides. We both learned an awful lot about each other and our work lives, and I've genuinely strengthened a friendship out of the back of this application, which I wasn't genuinely expecting. So it's an added bonus on the whole application process. The questions on the form, I will say, genuinely do look daunting. And the only advice I would give nods back to my substantive role in project and program world. And I said it in the chat room earlier on, chunk it up. Don't look at it as one big thing, because it's a bit like reading the book War and Peace. If you ever looked at the size of that document, you would never read it in a million years. But fundamentally, it's chapter after chapter after chapter. So chunk it up. I started off by writing a list of all the things that I felt that I'd done in my working career in the last 5 years that might have a nod to environmental impact, positive and negative. And I went old school. I printed off the guidance document that really is a brilliant guidance document and keeps you on track when you could potentially go off track when you're answering the questions. I printed that off and I wrote all my notes and possible examples next to all the questions. And then I looked at those examples, and some I had more than one, and I chose the strongest one for that and started to write. I also wrote the ones I found easiest first. This is like an exam paper, my daughter is heading into her GCSE years. The teachers constantly say, don't have to start with question 1. If you look at question 1 and go, but you think you can answer question 5, start with question 5 and it'll get your juices flowing. And I really would recommend doing exactly the same thing. Rob nodded to the word count. Anyone who knows me well knows that I struggled to be succinct at the best of times. So again, I wrote it in Word so that I could get everything out of my system, and then I could compact it from that point on. And I also used feedback from a number of colleagues to help me in that compacting as well, because I was very conscious that there's an element of context for some of the work that I did, and I needed to use some of my word count for context before I could go on to the examples I was given. Rob also nodded earlier on. I made an extra note. I am very, very, very guilty of going, we did this, we did that, we did this, we did that, especially when you lead a team, because fundamentally no one delivers anything as a lone ship. Read and reread and reread how often you write we in the first draft, because you have, and I've really struggled this from a personal perspective. I have achieved a lot of things, and I have really often described it as we have done a lot of things, but I have led my team to success that we have achieved together. So be very mindful that you have had an impact, but the impact was greater because of the combined efforts, and you just need to be very clear in your application of the impact that you had in that example. The other thing I would say is, when you've done your first draft, talked through other people with it. It really lifted things off the page for me, sharing the work. If I was particularly concerned about an answer I'd given, I went and spoke to Nicola, or I went and spoke to Matt, or I spoke to some of my peers and said, this is the answer I've given to this question. What do you think? Do you think I've covered it? Do you think I've gone off on a tangent, or I'm a bit stuck? I don't feel like it's giving enough meat to it. And the other thing I would say about feedback is you don't always have to take it. you know, I spoke earlier on about in the group chats about a mentor is a bit like a dating relationship. It has to work, and don't be afraid if that mentor relationship doesn't work. Just the same as in life, particularly at the start of your career, if someone gives you feedback, you take it as read. Some people gave me some feedback on my application that I disagreed with, so I chose not to change it. That doesn't mean that their feedback wasn't valid. You know, for them, they were giving their opinion, but you don't have to take every single person's opinion. And so don't feel that weight of responsibility just because you've asked someone's advice that you have to necessarily take it. And the other thing I would make at this point is IWater and the Society for Environment is the only governing body I can talk on behalf of, having gone through that process. They really want you to succeed. This is not a you try and then you fail. There is a breadth of advice you can get. Rob is amazing if you have any questions or queries. So don't worry about if you are stuck reaching out and asking for help. Don't put it under a pile of books and think that's not something you can complete any further. So I did all that hard work. I am an all or nothing kind of girl, so I did write it across probably a month, and then submitted it, and I pressed that big send button to Rob, paid my uplift and waited. The wait wasn't too long, to be fair, for mine. Very, very quick, really, bearing in mind they over-egg the expected timescales because sometimes there are gluts of applications at any one time. And I got given my date for my professional review with 2 IWater assessors. And again, as Rob said, this is not job interview. Oh my goodness, I prepared for this more than any job interview I've ever prepared for in my whole life, because I genuinely realised at that point how important it was. But it was not a job interview. It was simply the most amazing experience I've ever had in my life. How do I describe it in the chat room earlier? You go with those water cooler conversations at conferences where you suddenly meet a kindred spirit from another company, perhaps a completely different field to which you work in, and you start up a conversation, and all of a sudden you realise, oh my goodness, I can learn so much from you. You've got a similar opinion on this. You might have a slightly different opinion on this. And it's just a 2-hour hug is probably the best way of describing it. A professional hug. It's a validation. It's a confidence boost. It's a professional discussion about current interests, your work life, how that they might have questions about what you've done because they've never experienced that particular department before. You have the opportunity to ask them about their work experience and how and gain knowledge from that. It is just amazing. I said in the group chat earlier, I am not a runner. I am so not a runner. But I came out of that with so much energy, I actually went for a run. Now, I am not a runner because I either run or I breathe, and it doesn't seem to be one or the other. The whole opportunity of doing both at the same time, my body shuts down. So I didn't get very far, but I really needed to get out this energy that I had. And so that sideswiped me a bit because I wasn't expecting to come out invigorated. I was expecting to come out waiting, hoping, praying I'd be successful. So I suppose that's the biggest take home for me. I've got my certificate on the wall up here, and I'm very proud. The whole experience has been very validating for me. I really struggle with my confidence, and I promised I wouldn't get upset. But I really struggle with my confidence, and this has proven to me that I own my space. I earn my right to stand with my peers, despite the stupid dance charm degree that I did all those years ago. So yes, I would highly recommend this process from end to end, and don't let your confidence hold you back. You're on mute, Nicola.
As ever, amazing, Claire. Absolutely amazing. I think there's very little I could add to that one, but if anybody wants to reach out to either Claire, me, or any of the other people on this call, I know that they would be more than happy to have those conversations with you. Right, well, we're pretty much nearly at an end. Really, today for me is really if you have any final questions you want to ask us. I've had a quick look over in the Q&A. I'm hoping maybe you've answered a lot of them when you've been in the rooms, but feel free. If not, this is your time to ask a question. And if you want to be brave, you can use the hands up function as well. You know, some people prefer the human touch, as it were, opposed to the typing away. I have activated Slido again. I hope it's still working, she says, but with the IT gremlins today, who knows? But I would like to know whether you think you've achieved what you set out for today. So you should be able to see that, and it should come up, and I've just put it with a bit of a smiley face kind of environment. So yep, I can see it's working because I've definitely got some people come in. Phew, then at least I know the IT is working, she says. What I will say as well is, in the absence of any questions, but I will give it a few minutes, can I thank all of the people today who have been involved in the session. This session doesn't work with just me being here. It's the extra people that are all hiding in the background at the moment of this call, who facilitated all the rooms and shared their personal experiences. Without that, it just doesn't work. So please take a moment just to give them a round of applause, just to, you know, just acknowledge that, if that's all right. Brilliant. Thank you. The recording will be available. And we'll get it sent straight out to you as soon as we can. And I'll also make sure you've got the Excel sheet in there as well. But equally, if you've got any other questions, you're free to ask them. Myself and the hosts will stay around for a little longer because I need to get a photo with all of our facilitators, because I usually forget. So that is the message to everybody who's facilitated. Please stay on the call if you may for a few minutes. Please feel free to reach out to me if you need anything. My email is there. I'm also on LinkedIn as well, and you can connect with me there. Just a reminder, one of the great ways to improve your development and get opportunities is to join us for one of our events. So if you're not a member and we haven't convinced you to sign up, please do explore what events we've got for the coming year. Certainly Claire and I have put quite a lot together in the Eastern area, and it involves all sorts of things, you know, right across the piece, from webinars to face-to-face. Claire and I are doing a face-to-face event next week in Peterborough. If you happen to be in the vicinity, please have a look. It's a free event, and you get to meet lots of different leaders across the industry. So an amazing event. But if not, there is many a webinar that you can join as well. And we look forward to seeing you on another opportunity. So I'm going to wrap the session up there in the absence of questions, but that doesn't stop you asking questions, obviously offline. But thank you for coming today, and thank you for making the time, because I know it takes a long time out of your day, and it is a long session, this one, but I hope you feel that it was beneficial. Thank you very much.